When Daniel realized he was within spitting distance of the clearing where the cabin rested, he moved back into the brush and tied Haas to a small dogwood tree. On foot, he and Jake circled around through the forest to the eastern side of the clearing, on the back side of the cabin. There, he watched and waited. From here, Daniel could see the men more clearly. By 1800 standard, the men were pretty large in stature. The tallest was still only about 5 feet 10 inches, much smaller than Daniel's 6 feet 2 inches. 3 of the men were probably in their mid-20s. The 4th was just a boy, maybe 17 years old. The ill intent of these men became evident very quickly. The boy and one of the men rode toward the corral where David was working. The other 2 stayed by the cabin and were speaking to Sarah. Daniel couldn't hear the conversation, but their mannerisms made it clear they were here to rob and maybe even kill the inhabitants of this domicile. Daniel could see right through the dog trot, but his vision was obstructed whenever the men moved past the entrance. "Jake, stay," Daniel told the dog. Jake whimpered but obeyed. Daniel moved back around to the front of the house, still concealing himself in the brush that surrounded the clearing. He could see the 2 men down at the corral were dismounting and approaching David now. At the cabin, one of the men had moved inside the cabin and was evidently ransacking the place, looking for something. The other man held Sarah at bay. Suddenly, the man grabbed Sarah and held her in a bear hug. His back was to Daniel. Daniel looked around for anything to help him as a weapon. He saw it. The axe was still planted in the stump where he'd been splitting firewood the day before. Daniel leaped from the brush, running toward Sarah's assailant. As he passed the stump, he grabbed the axe and lifted it above his head. He was running out of time, however, because the man had lifted his knife from his belt sheath and was bringing it above his body, ready to plunge it into Sarah. Daniel stopped suddenly, then flung the axe from his hands. The axe twirled through the air, end over end, until it landed squarely into the man's backbone. The man froze. His grip on Sarah was released, and she fell away from him. The axe must have severed his spine because he didn't die right away, but he couldn't move from where he fell on the ground. He screamed in pain, which alerted the man inside the cabin. The second man came running out, with pistol in hand. He moved toward Daniel, pointing the gun at him. "Jake!" shouted Daniel. Jake ran through the dog trot and jumped the man, biting his arm that brandished the pistol. A shot rang out as the gun expelled its load, but it missed its mark. Daniel continued running toward the man and reached out and grabbed the spit rod that was still by the fire where they had roasted the Christmas turkey. He drove the spit into the man's chest like a knight on horseback thrusting his lance. Daniel and the man tumbled to the ground. When Daniel was able to get up, he saw that the spit had pierced the man's heart. His eyes were frozen, wide open. He gurgled on the blood that rose up into his throat, and blood ran from the corners of his mouth. He coughed and spit as he choked on his own blood.